Lesson 38. About Sambhavi Mudra, I looked it up. It's mentioned in chapter 4, starting from Sutra 36. It's really worthwhile to read those sutras and Ajita's comments also. In Sutra 43, Sutra 38, Sambhavi Mudra is mentioned in one breath with Kechari Mudra, which I mentioned before. Sambhavi Mudra being supercharged Shakti energy, Kechari Mudra being supercharged Shiva energy. Anyway, let's go back to the philosophy of the Kleshas. This is the last, we wrap up today this wonderful subject. Philosophy of the Kleshas, according to the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, chapter 2, starting from Sutra 20. The seer is pure consciousness, but though pure, appears to see through the mind. The seer is pure consciousness. The seer is the crown chakra, the omniscient entity in you that has no limitations, no boundaries. In sheer contemplation, it gives you insight into matter, into issues that you know nothing of yet. It is how ancient people, in fact, practiced science. Not by reading books, by learning formulas or memorizing things, but through sheer contemplation. The science as we know it today very often exists out of learning things and then basically limiting our field of expertise to what we have learned. Some people stand out, they have the ability to contemplate, and they become the specialists in the field. They become those people. They stand out because they develop new insights. Insights that nobody ever thought of before. So contemplating the material they have before them, they develop insights or new inventions, revolutionary inventions that didn't exist before. Totally new idea. What Patanjali is describing here is a big obstacle we are facing. If you understand how it works, that there is sheer consciousness which rises far beyond the power of thought, the intellect, you would just say, okay, today I'm going to function basically on contemplative power only. I will only contemplate, I will only pursue to have new insights and leave the intellect out of it because the intellect is limited to how it is conditioned. If it were that simple, we would all be geniuses. The reality is only a very small number of people possess genius. Patanjali here is putting his finger on the sore spot. He says, the seer is pure consciousness, but though pure, appears to see through the mind. The mind is the dominant entity functioning in us. And when we contemplate and receive deep insights, there is the danger that we interpret these revelations by the limited mind. To some extent that is unavoidable. So you're looking at a very fluid situation here. But the mind should take a back seat, and the contemplation should be in the driver's seat, not the opposite way. It is because of this that sometimes we fail to see new insights. We are close to solving a problem, but the mind stands in the way. The mind being limited by what it knows, but not capable of thinking out of the box, not capable of seeing new perspectives. In contemplation, you do think out of the box, you are capable of seeing entirely new perspectives, but it is a very refined interaction with the mind that will allow you to then bring it down and actually present it as a new or revolutionary insight or invention. We are working to a conclusion today. You will see that Patanjali's solution to the problem is refreshingly simple. He says just practice yoga, basically. To fuel contemplative power, to allow contemplation to sit in the driver's seat while the intellect functions as an assistant in the process. That just happens if you practice yoga regularly, especially meditation, of course. So he said that before, when he gave us the solution to the Kleshas, our battle with the 5 miseries in life. Some of them can be reversed back into their origin, but if they are too serious, if they are too big, then meditation is the answer. It is through meditation in the first place that we develop the power of contemplation. And the higher we bring that conditioning through our practice, the more you have the ability to function based on contemplation. And having intellect only functioning as an assistant. Sutra 21. The very being of the seen is for your sake. Prakriti, matter, only exists only for our sake. And God created the world for man. Not to destroy it, as we do these days, but to learn and to grow. We saw this last week also, where, in other words, Patanjali is saying the world is your playground. If you start playing consciously, it will lead to liberation. Here you have an extension of that. The very being of the seen is for your sake. And then between brackets, Prakriti, meaning Prakriti exists only for your sake. What we do with Prakriti, the world of matter, is we want to possess, we want to control. We want to control even by means of destruction. We are destroying nature, we are destroying the ocean, we are destroying species. Are going extinct because we are destroying them. because we don't respect matter anymore, because we have taken possession of the world around us, that rather than living with it, in respect of it, with respect for it. The world of matter exists for us not to possess, and definitely not to destroy, but to start living in union, in harmony with. Then, as we saw last week, we live consciously, we experience consciously, and then a very dynamic process of learning, drawing conclusions from failures and experiences, leading to tremendous growth and development, and Patanjali promising liberation even. You see in New Age circles, in spiritual circles, very much that people, they choose organic over factory produced foodstuffs. They avoid animal products because it means animals are being killed for their sake. And you see them choosing holiday destinations that are respecting the ecology, that are respecting nature. So this is all in line a little bit with what Patanjali here is teaching us. But interestingly is that people who develop consciousness naturally feel drawn towards that direction, respecting nature, choosing sensible, making sensible choices about concerning food and so on, respecting animals, nature, what have you, trying to avoid chemicals and these kind of things, and avoiding also destruction of nature for our own entertainment, like vacations where nature is not being respected. Sutra 22. Although it becomes non-existence for those whose purpose has been fulfilled, it continues to exist for others on account of being common to others besides you. This sounds like a riddle, doesn't it? Like many of the sutras actually do. But this also, like the others, has very practical insight for us. Although it becomes non-existence for him whose purpose has been fulfilled, it continues to exist for others on account of being common to others. This is what happens. You become more sensitive and conscious. You become a bit eccentric. You do everything in particular ways because you do it mindfully. Everything has to have a logic, a certain order. It has to make sense. You become more sensitive. There is a tendency to become perfectionist, even to the point of obsessive compulsive disorder. When you are on this path. But this sutra is giving us a warning, because your transformation takes place very gradually. You haven't noticed the transformation. So you find yourself one day having slowly transformed, functioning very differently from the way that you did last year or 5 years ago, being very mindful of everything, and you then start seeing the imperfection in other people, the people around you. You start seeing that other people are not using common sense, while you do. You start seeing that people seem to lack logic. That they just do things at random without a system, without an order, or even a purpose. And it will start to irritate you. Because you have slowly, gradually, unknowingly transformed in a person for whom everything has to have a logic, has to be backed up by common sense, has to have a certain order. And you become irritated by people who don't possess that, which is the majority of the people, because not everybody is on this path that you are on. Patanjali is giving a warning here. Do not fall into that trap. Because this is one of the things that you will also find in circles of New Age groups, among yoga groups, among other spiritual practice groups. That is, people have a tendency to feel superior compared to people who are not part of that group or that community. Because they develop what we can call common sense, because they practice naturally mindfulness as a result of their practice. Patanjali here is appealing to your compassion. He says, you may have changed, but others have not. You cannot demand perfection from others who have not had the benefit of this kind of practice and study. Have compassion for those who are still ignorant, for those who are still lacking common sense, because you were once one of them. There was a time that you were just as ignorant as them. Do not forget. Do not forget where you are coming from. And understand that other people may reach the level that you are at, but they are not there yet. And maybe in this life they will even not get there if they don't come across a practice like yoga or any kind of practice that leads to increased mindfulness. Patanjali here being very considerate towards you, because there is this tendency when you are not aware of how you have transformed, but you find yourself one day functioning on a different level of consciousness. You find yourself having common sense and requiring things to have a certain logic and purpose, but that has crept in very gradually, unnoticeable. So Patanjali is compassionate towards you, hoping to prevent you from falling into that trap where you get irritated by other people's imperfection. But then also he is compassionate to the people that still live in a condition of ignorance, that you do not judge them for their imperfections. They haven't had the benefit that you had of this special path that you are on, that allowed you to see the light, that allowed you to transform, to grow and develop. Sutra 23. The purpose of the coming together of the Purusha and Prakriti is gaining by the Purusha of the awareness of your true nature and the unfoldment of powers inherent in you and Prakriti. Another riddle, but very practical meaning. Purusha is the soul, your soul. Prakriti is matter, the world around you. The purpose of the coming together of your soul with the world around us, the world of matter, is gaining by your soul awareness of your true nature. We know, we have learned that people live in a condition of ignorance and they see themselves on a very superficial level. We have all seen ourselves on a very superficial level, on a very material level. But we have learned that there are potential characteristics that are embedded in us but have not had a chance to manifest yet. We have all kinds of, we call them royal characteristics in the crown chakra that do not have the fuel to manifest because there is not enough energy in the crown chakra where they are located. Patanjali is telling us here that living life in the world around us is in fact designed to help us climb the ladder towards heaven, towards enlightenment, towards liberation. But this works only when we start living life consciously, which of course is already happening as a result of you practicing yoga. So again, he's telling us here, the world is our playground. Play it consciously and it will lead to marvelous results. Which also implicates, which also means indirectly or directly, if you continue living in an ignorant condition, this world of matter will only cause you suffering, which is the condition that the majority of the people are in. Always in conflict, always unhappy, unsatisfied, and what have you. Because they do not possess the insight yet to start learning from the experience that the material world around us presents us. Interactions with other people, successes and failures, everything in daily life can become our teacher the moment that we start living consciously, living mindfully. This is important because people who take their yoga practice very serious, they have a tendency to isolate themselves from the material world. Because the world, material possession, enjoyment, all these kind of things, mistakenly is considered to be off limits for people on the spiritual path. You have to become very austere. You're not allowed to drink anymore, to eat delicious food anymore. But that is actually not what Patanjali is saying. Patanjali says you are only human. Yes, you started practicing yoga, but that is only making you conscious. It doesn't mean that you stop being human or that you isolate yourself from society or any kind of worldly matters. No, on the contrary. Because if you isolate yourself, you have no learning material anymore. If you don't experience anything anymore in the world, then you don't learn and grow anymore. Continue life, be human. You like a glass of wine? Nobody told you that you shouldn't. But Patanjali says, do it consciously, because if you drink 3 or 4 glasses of wine and it gives you a headache, you know what to do next time. Limit yourself, control yourself. And this applies to everything and anything in life. Interactions with people can lead to conflict. If that is the case, try to figure out what happened and why it led to conflict and make adjustments to your behavior. Do not point fingers at people, it's useless. People whose bad behavior is part of the conflict, they have their own karma to take care of. They have to take care of their behavior. You only look at yourself. What is my part in all this? This is about the Kleshas. Avoiding misery in life can only be done by honestly looking at our role in all of this. What did I do that led to this? So live life, but do it consciously from now on. Do not isolate yourself or limit yourself. In a very natural way, when you become more conscious and sensitive, you will eliminate harmful elements from your life. In terms of food, but also in terms of relationships. Gradually, remember the word gradual. Everything takes time, especially things that you have done all your life since you were born. Take time to transform or in the end even get rid of. How did we end up with all this misery? Sutra 24. Its cause is the lack of awareness of your real nature. Because we have no soul connection, we are focused on how we are educated. We are focused on the culture in which we were born. We are focused on material things, superficial things, and we identify with that. That is the ignorance that stands at the foundation of misery, our suffering. So how can we solve that problem? How can we solve that ignorance that has led to all that misery and disconnection with the soul? Sutra 25. The dissociation of Purusha and Prakriti brought about by the dispersion of avidya is the real remedy, and that is the liberation of the Seer. It's about getting rid of ignorance. Continue living your life, do it conscious from now on, consciously, and learn from every experience that you have in life, turning avidya, which is the cause of every misery, into vidya, which is wisdom, insight. How can we do that? How can we get rid of ignorance? Sutra 26. The uninterrupted practice of the awareness of the real is the means of dispersion. Another riddle. It is an extension of the previous sutra, which was an extension of the one before. Patanjali is repeating the essence of what this is all about again and again. The practice of the real is everything that is beyond the superficial, everything that is beyond your conditioning brought about by identifications with culture, by education, by upbringing by your parents, and focusing more and more on what you truly feel. The real is written here with a capital R. What you truly feel brings us back to the idea that we live more and more from the heart and less from the head. To give you an example, I have achieved everything in the past 35 years as a result of more and more following my feeling and less following my head. As a result of this, the things that I decided to do or did people frowned upon. People warned me not to do. People would tell me, live a normal life like everybody else does. Pursue a career, buy a house, start a family. I couldn't do those things because as a result of my discovery of yoga, practicing yoga on a daily basis, I naturally started more and more living my life based on feeling and not based on thought. That has brought me to Korea. But let me give you a very clear example. I had 2 dogs. One of them died in 2012, and I was left with one dog who was very dear to me because I rescued her when she was just a little puppy, almost dead when I found her. So I developed a very deep bond with her, and her death was very traumatic. And I was alone, and everything in my life seemed to not go well. I had decided it was time to take a break from teaching yoga, and I vowed never to have a dog anymore. No, before that, while she was still alive, I said, if I ever have a dog again, it must be a female dog. Because female dogs and male dogs behave differently. And many of the male dogs that I know, for example, in the park, I just don't like the way that they behave. It's kind of like among human beings too. The moon is not steady in them, so they have this aggression and this obnoxious behavior, and I don't like it. But female dogs have a different behavior. So that was the first thing. I vowed never to have a male dog. And then I vowed never to have a dog anymore after the traumatic death of my beloved Vitya. And you know what happened? I rescued a male dog 6 months later. Remember, I vowed never to have a dog anymore, which is a mental thing. The moment that dog appeared in the park and I saw the dog, I connected with that dog, Pada. He connected with me. We looked each other in the eye. And if I had just stuck to my mental construction, which is what normally people do, I vowed never to have a dog anymore, I would have immediately detached myself from that connection. I would have said, no, no more, never more, and I would have turned around and just not be concerned anymore. But I followed my heart because that feeling was very strong. And I went to the park twice a day with my red backpack full of fresh water, snacks, dry food and canned food. And I fed him. I tried to create a bond of trust with him so that one day I could put a leash on and take him home. People told me, what are you doing? It's a wild dog. And you don't even have a job. You don't even have an income. And you're alone in a foreign country. I couldn't ignore it. I followed my heart. And it just gave my life purpose again. I had lost purpose. It gave my life purpose again. I woke up again in the morning with a feeling, I have a duty to fulfill. The first thing I do when I wake up is walk the dog, which is also good for me. You know, I get to walk. The universe heard my vows never to have a male dog, and then heard my vow never to have a dog. This is just how I picture it and laugh about it. And he said, poof, here, you have a male dog. Not only one, he gave me another one. Now I have 2. And they changed my life for the better, so much better. They turned my life upside down, to be sure. They destroyed half my interior. I was busy with them day and night. The female dog was so unstable, she peed on my bed once or twice a day. So my neighbors were asking, why are you washing your bedding every day? I just had to. She peed on my bed all the time because I couldn't take her out. I couldn't even touch her. I couldn't put a leash on her. So they turned my life upside down, no mistake about that. But I needed that. And the universe knows that. I followed my heart. I did what I had to do. And I didn't let my mind stand in the way. I didn't choose the easy way, avoiding this holy responsibility. And it changed my life. And it's happening again. I vowed never to have a relationship anymore with somebody who is much younger or older than me. I want to have a relationship with somebody who is approximately on the same age with me. I should stop vowing things because the universe throws at me the most extreme things. But the thing is, it turns out so amazingly well. That is following your heart. That is focusing on the real here. It doesn't make life easy. On the contrary. But it leads to fulfillment. It leads to having purpose. I mean, I could have a yoga studio and be busy teaching yoga, which I did for years, and of course, I need the income, but now I have 2 dogs. It's a full-time job, and I enjoy it. Instead of focusing on Prakriti, the world of matter, I focus on the world of heart, soul. And there is nothing more satisfying than. And you know what? The reason why I have the courage to do all this is because I notice that the universe takes care of me. I have the courage to take risk, perceived risk, because that's a mental construction. I have the courage to follow my heart and do my holy duty, perform what the universe gives me to do, the tasks the universe gives me to do, and the universe takes care of me. It almost starts sounding like a religion, like I'm preaching a religion. But I'm just sharing from my personal experience. If there is an atheist in this room, it is me. I do not believe in the philosophy of the established religions that ask you to worship somebody who doesn't exist. But you know, I have explained what I think is God. For me, that is the all-encompassing intelligence or consciousness of the universe, of which all of us are part. And as long as we are disconnected from that intelligence, separated, we keep suffering. Well, when we start following our hearts, our lives on the surface do not seem easy, but everything starts making sense. And you start growing and developing like never before. And Patanjali confirms that it works like that. How do you approach this? For me, it's easy, having been on this path for 40 years. There are many things happening in life, and many of those are based on our intellect. But try to introduce feeling in life. When I went to the park and I discovered that wandering dog, some spark lit inside of me. There was a sense of enthusiasm, there was a sense of duty, there was a sense of compassion. I could have ignored it because of a mental construction that I had vowed never to have a dog anymore. But I have learned that when you feel something, when there is a spark, when there is compassion or passion, it is something that needs to be followed up on. And it always leads to wonderful development. Doesn't mean that it's always successful, doesn't mean that it's always without conflict or misery. Relationships can sometimes end. But until then, they have contributed enormously to your development. So follow your heart and don't be afraid. Because the universe will give you what you need. And if it ends in misery, what you need is not the misery, but the lesson that you draw from it. So stop being afraid anymore. Do not make decisions based on fear anymore. Start making decisions based on what you feel. The opposite is also true when something feels really off, when something feels really bad. It means that you have to stay away from it. Even though your mind tells you, this is important, you must pursue this because there is a kind of an interest. Relationships that are based on this principle end in disaster, end in abuse, end in huge conflict, huge misery. We miss the red flags. There are red flags in the beginning, but we miss them because there is an overriding need. A need for a warm hand maybe, a cuddle, a need for passion, or a material need. But the red flags have given you a warning. And I've had such situation many times in my life. And I learned not to ignore the red flags anymore. It is the reason why for the past 7 years I have been single. There have been people of interest, women of interest, with whom I thought I might be able, possibly, to have a relationship. It just doesn't take off. There is no spark. There is no enthusiasm. There is no chemistry. And there are some red flags, which I do not override anymore, which I do not overrule anymore, because I know that it will lead to misery. But I learned from a lot of misery to start respecting this. And it allowed me not only to be 7 years single, I'd rather not have been single, but I knew that I really needed it to reorganize my life. And now I have 2 dogs, no job to speak of, no income to speak of, and yet it all works out magnificently well, amazingly well. And I thank the universe for that. But not only the universe, God helps only those who help themselves. You have to have courage. And you have to have persistence also. What I mean by that is, in 2008, I started experimenting with investment. 2008, that is 13 years ago. Until 2 years ago, I failed time and time again. Until 2 years ago. Until 3 years ago. I lost money. Quite a lot. Normally people give up, especially when it's about money. When people lose money, they give up. I did not give up. because it is a process. Of course, I was lucky at that time. I had a good income, so I didn't go bankrupt, but honestly, I lost a lot of money. Had I given up, I would have just lost that money. Now, as a result of this whole process of trial and error, making horrible mistakes out of ignorance, I ended up having some income by investing. I would never have gotten there without courage, without persistence, and without the firm belief that I would sooner or later succeed. So God helps only those who help themselves. You must. You know, at the very last point, when the money that I had was almost done, through the drain, at the very last moment, at the moment of desperation, I found the right formula to start investing with the right people. I found, in fact, a yogi investor, which means somebody who works with their heart. And no surprise, it's a female. Men that are involved in the it's very popular these days. The men that are doing these investment clubs and things, they're very greedy and selfish, and they cheat a lot. But this lady that I found, we had a chemistry, we had a click, we communicated, and just like with the dogs, I know deep in my heart, finally. And so far so good. So far so good. And I'm slowly recovering the money that I lost throughout all those years. It's going to take a lot more years to further recover, but look at the process, it's just amazing. I could have given up, which probably would have meant that I would not be living in Korea anymore. I don't know where I would have ended. Maybe I would have jumped off the bridge in just sheer desperation. Honestly, I'm not joking. I've contemplated that sometimes, but I'm just totally not capable of going there, because I know how it works, because I know that misery is there to teach you something. So I learn, and I hang in there. And you know what I do when everything seems to be totally off? I just focus on taking care of myself and my dogs. Exercise, eat well, keep a regular routine. Because the mistake that people make when they are miserable is they drown in that misery. And their physical and mental condition suffer in line with that. So it becomes a vicious circle. The uninterrupted practice of the real is following your heart. Follow feeling. I said when explaining mudra that feeling is more powerful than thought. It really is. But thought is involved to interpret what you are feeling. So that is a bit complex, and that is how today the lecture actually starts. With the first sutra, Sutra 20, where Patanjali says, the seer is pure consciousness, but though pure, sees through the mind. The mind is involved there. And it makes it not easy to live like that. Because you are conditioned to think in certain ways, to judge situations in certain ways. That is mental. Where in your heart, everything is possible. It's just, you have to find a way to let the heart and the mind function in harmony with one another, with the mind as an assistant to the heart. Experiment with this concept a little bit in life. Follow your feeling and see how that where that leads. Be aware also that when you deny what you feel and you interfere in the process with the intellect, with the mind, that it basically cuts off a process that you are in, a process of development that you are in. Try to be aware of that. Don't take on unnecessary risks, but try more and more to follow feeling. Sutra, where were we? 27. In his case, the highest stage of enlightenment is reached by 7 stages. What do you think this means? In your case, in my case, the highest stage of enlightenment is reached by 7 stages. 7 stages? Sound familiar? Yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana. 7 stages of yoga that lead to the 8th stage, which is samadhi, which for many people sounds very mysterious, but samadhi is that condition in which you function based on the crown chakra. There are techniques with which you can sharpen samadhi, but samadhi is not a technique, it's a condition. There are techniques we call samadhi that get you there. June knows those exercises. But it is, if you practice yoga regularly, you have spontaneous functioning of the crown chakra. Spontaneous samadhi. It's not correct to call it like that, because it is a controlled condition that you reach through meditations of more than an hour. But you don't have to reach such a high stage. If you practice yoga regularly, the 7 stages, you develop the ability to contemplate, and that is what samadhi is about. If you formalize it and you train towards samadhi, of course you reach greater heights. But such perfection is not needed. Practice yoga regularly and everything will change. Sutra 28 drives the message home. From the practice of the component exercises of yoga on the destruction of impurity or ignorance arises spiritual illumination, which develops into awareness of reality with a capital R. Illumination is the crown chakra. There are what do you call it again? There are artworks where holy people, holy men or women are being depicted. Illustration is the words that I'm looking for. Where there is a flame above the head of the deity. Illumination. Christmas is a celebration of light. The people think candlelight or sunlight, but it's light represents energy in the crown chakra. That is where the word enlightenment comes from. Darkness is the opposite. Darkness is ignorance. Darkness and light. Ignorance and wisdom. All philosophical books from India have this word Deepika, which means light on. Light on. It is a reflection, it is an insight into a certain subject. So I don't know if you noticed, but when you were looking for a book that I recommended, Light on Yoga, there is the possibility that you find 7 different kinds of books with the same title. Even the same author has 2 books with the same title, Yoga Dipika. One very philosophical without exercises and one only with exercises. Because all books are called light on this, light on that, which is directly referring to the light in the crown chakra. Illumination. This sutra is also very important. If you have listened to what I've tried to explain with examples of my own life, it may sound very complicated or maybe even difficult to achieve. But Patanjali makes it simple here. Practice yoga and it will naturally unfold. Not today, not tomorrow, it's a process. But that's the path you are on. We're all on the same path. And some are a little bit further down the path than others. But you're all on the same path of development. And if it sounds overwhelming or complicated, remember, the only thing that counts is that you practice regularly. All the rest is a consequence of that. All the transformation, all the wonderful promises of the future, the support of the universe along the way is all a result of you practicing yoga regularly. Fairly regularly. I've had my times that I got distracted and didn't practice for a while, or practice only 2 or once a week, or drank too much beer, got lost. That was necessary, that was all part of playing in the world of matter and learning through the confrontation with failure and misery. So practice and the rest will all manifest. All the wonderful things that Patanjali is presenting us, that we are discussing, they will manifest when the time is right. Okay? That was the end of the philosophy of the Kleshas. The conclusion of Patanjali is to deal with all these Kleshas, with ignorance, with all the misery, practice yoga. Alright? Let's have a short break. Questions? Questions?